let's fire up the time machine. We are leaving the parched plains of 1930s America behind and touching down in the center of a continent that has just lived through the worst nightmare in human history. Europe, May 1945. The smoke of World War II is barely cleared. Imagine you are a demobilized soldier, a former munitions factory worker, or a refugee returning home. All around you, whether in London, Berlin, Rotterdam, or Warsaw, there is nothing but colossal mountains of rubble. The transit systems are paralyzed. Governments are drowning in debt. Millions of people have no jobs, no papers, and no food. You don't have a single valuable coin in your pocket. You wander through the cratered streets, step into the ruins of an old factory, and your eyes lock onto a steel object with a worn wooden handle, a hammer. The moment you pick it up, a romantic, hopeful illusion of basic economics ignites in your mind. You look around. Millions of homes need to be rebuilt. Thousands of bridges need repairing. Tens of thousands of factories need restoring. You think of the most fundamental principle of supply and demand. You and your hammer are the supply, standing in front of an infinite, bottomless demand. You tell yourself, the world is in ruins. People are desperate for a roof over their heads. I have a hammer, and I have my health. I just need to knock on the doors of those digging through the rubble, offer to frame their walls and patch their roofs. The work is endless. I will become a wealthy contractor, rebuilding this continent with my own two hands. It is a brilliant vision of self-reliance. You believe you are holding the ultimate tool of civilization, the tool of creation. But welcome to the brutal reality of a completely shattered post-war economy. By picking up that hammer and pricing your labor based purely on what your eyes can see, you have just thrown yourself into the most ruthless macroeconomic trap imaginable. The shocking truth that peacetime economics textbooks leave out is this: destruction does not automatically generate effective demand. When you carry a hammer, looking for work in an economy where the monetary system has collapsed, you are not an entrepreneur. In terms of unit economics, you are merely a biological combustion engine trying to run in an environment with zero fuel. Furthermore, the act of swinging a hammer, which you think adds value, can literally drive you into biological bankruptcy. You could starve. Why? Because you ignored the total fracture of the supply chain. So, put away the fantasy of single-handedly rebuilding Paris or Berlin. Today, we are going to use a modern financial lens to dissect the life-or-death numbers buried under the ashes of Europe from 1945 to 1952. When we think of the European Reconstruction era, the classic image is lines of people with hammers and shovels, diligently clearing rubble and laying bricks. But if you only look at the physical action, you will never understand why some people holding hammers eventually died of malnutrition, while others became the industrial tycoons of the economic miracle. The entire ecosystem of a ruined economy is divided into entirely different business models. Your hammer is just a symbolic object. How you position that hammer in the value chain is what dictates your survival. Model 1. Commodity labor and the ration economy. This is the default path and the ultimate poverty trap. You take your hammer to the clearing sites managed by the provisional government or occupying military forces. The core economic problem here is that you are trading in a monopsony market with only one buyer. And they don't pay you in money because paper money is worthless. They pay you in ration cards. Your pricing power is a flat zero. You swing a hammer 12 hours a day, smashing concrete and bending steel, not to get rich, but simply to secure the minimum caloric baseline needed to survive tomorrow. Your labor is reduced to a pure commodity with a 0% profit margin. Model 2. The barter economy and scrap arbitrage. This is where the economically minded began to pull ahead. They realized that in 1945, driving a nail in didn't make money, but pulling a nail out generated an asset. You don't use your hammer to build houses. You use it to smash through ruined walls to recover highly valuable materials, copper pipes, electrical wire, intact bricks, and lead. This model operates on commodity arbitrage. In an economy with a severed global supply chain, physical building materials are infinitely more valuable than labor services. You take these copper pipes to the black market, the only truly free market at the time. There, you trade them for the ultimate supranational currency, the cigarette standard. A foot of copper wire gets you 5 cigarettes, and those 5 cigarettes can be exchanged for meat, butter, or charcoal. By pivoting from a builder to a resource extractor, you tapped into the highest liquidity cash flow in a dead economy. Model 3, B2G subcontracting and foreign exchange bottlenecks. When things started to stabilize between 1947 and 1948, especially when the Marshall Plan began pumping billions of US dollars into Europe, the rules of the game changed entirely. Massive foreign capital was flowing in, but it wasn't going into the pockets of ordinary citizens. It flowed into governments and heavy industry corporations. If you were still knocking on residential doors offering to fix roofs, you stayed poor because the citizens had no dollars. The optimal model now was B2G, business to government. You approached the massive contractors receiving Marshall Plan disbursements to rebuild railways and ports. You offer a deal. I have hammers, I have tools, and I have a crew of 5 skilled men. Subcontract the concrete formwork to us. You are no longer selling individual labor. You are selling execution capacity to entities that have access to US dollars or the new Deutsche Mark. You turned your hammer into a small toll booth on the massive highway of international aid. The biggest reason the dream of rebuilding with a hammer turned into a biological death sentence is because people were completely blind to the concept of operating cost hyperinflation in a ruined state. Imagine you agree to fix a neighbor's roof. They promise to pay you a stack of paper money, Reichsmarks in Germany or francs in France. You swing your hammer for a week. You think you just made a profitable deal. In reality, you are committing financial and physical suicide. Let's dissect the hidden iceberg of post-war costs. Number 1, caloric deficit and exponential biological depreciation. In peacetime, the cost of eating lunch to fuel manual labor takes up a tiny fraction of your income, but in Europe, between 1945 and 1947, food was the most expensive, most precious asset on Earth. Biologically speaking, swinging a hammer, climbing, and hauling debris in freezing weather forces your body to burn between 3,500 and 4,000 calories a day. However, government-issued ration cards in many areas provided only 900 to 1 in 200 calories a day. Do you see the economic math here? The operating expense of your biological engine is 3 times higher than the fuel revenue you receive. With every strike of the hammer, you are cannibalizing your own muscle and fat reserves. You are not generating a surplus. You are operating at a net caloric loss. If you work yourself to the bone for paper money that cannot buy extra food, because the black market prices are astronomical, you will die of exhaustion before the roof is finished. This is biological bankruptcy. Number 2, supply chain bottlenecks. You have a perfectly good hammer, but a hammer is a dependent asset. It has 0 intrinsic value without its companion asset, nails, and wooden planks. In 1946, the steel mills were bombed flat. Forests were overharvested, and the severed railways couldn't transport timber anyway. This created an extreme supply shock. You have a hammer, but a nail is more expensive than gold. A carpenter with a hammer but no nails is as useless as a programmer with a laptop but no electricity. Failing to account for input costs forces you into prolonged downtime. You can't finish the job, you can't hand over the project, and therefore, you have 0 cash flow. Your hammer becomes a dead weight of iron. Number 3, currency risk and the evaporation of fiat. Let's go back to that stack of paper money you got for fixing the roof. In Germany before 1948, the Reichsmark suffered from hyperinflation and a total collapse of public trust. People literally used it as kindling for their stoves because it was cheaper than buying firewood. When you sell tangible, physical labor for a piece of paper that loses value by the hour, you are absorbing 100% of the currency risk. The hidden cost here is inflationary theft. Your real asset, your labor, has been converted into worthless debt. The smartest survivors adopted a 0 fiat policy. They absolutely refused paper money. They priced their labor in hard goods. I will fix your roof for 2 sacks of coal, 1 kilo of potatoes, and 10 Lucky Strike cigarettes. If you didn't know how to hedge your currency risk with physical commodities, swinging your hammer was just blind charity. Number 4, extreme tail risk and health hazards. Another brutal hidden cost was the working environment itself. The ruins of Europe were not a peacetime construction site. They were littered with unexploded ordnance, artillery shells, toxic asbestos, and structurally compromised walls that could collapse at any second. When you swing a hammer into a ruined wall, there is a statistical probability you will strike a detonator. In your solo business model, you have absolutely no liability insurance and no health insurance. If you get injured, you lose your entire capacity to work. Your income drops to zero, and there is no social safety net strong enough to catch you. The risk premium for manual construction work at the time was absurdly low compared to the price you paid with your life. By now, facing starvation, unexploded bombs, and a shattered financial system, you might ask in despair, then how was Western Europe ever rebuilt? How did massive construction conglomerates rise from those ashes? The answer lies in a counterintuitive paradox that the survivors understood to their very marrow. In a ruined economy, value does not come from how hard you can swing a hammer, but from your ability to use that hammer to unblock the supply chain and intercept foreign capital. The hammer itself doesn't print money. Pure muscular labor is the cheapest commodity on earth when millions of starving refugees have the exact same physical strength as you. Wealth creation comes from strategic positioning. The loser looks at the rubble and sees houses that need to be built. They carry a hammer and build homes while nobody has the money to pay them. The winner looks at the rubble and sees an open pit mine. They use their hammer to smash walls and extract every meter of copper wire and steel piping. They understood that when the Marshall Plan poured tens of billions of dollars in to restore national power grids and industrial plants, the one thing those massive corporations thirsted for was raw scrap material. You cannot rebuild a factory by yourself, but you can become the raw materials supplier for that factory. You use the hammer to extract scrap, sell it to major collection points for dollars or hard goods. You accumulate capital. Then you buy a second hammer, a third, and hire the starving men on the street to work for you. You scale up. Power doesn't lie in the kinetic energy of the hammer. Power lies in the ledger and the ability to read macroeconomic flows. The people who got rich during the European Reconstruction were not the hardest working bricklayers. They were the ones who turned themselves into a node in the global network of material logistics and foreign aid. To truly visualize the ruthlessness of this era's economics, let's look at two realistic scenarios of what happened to survivors who brought their hammers to the streets in 1945. Scenario A, the inflationary spiral of the stubborn builder. You are a carpenter in Frankfurt, clinging tightly to a 1930s mindset. You take your hammer and agree to patch up the bombed-out storefronts of local shops. You are proud to be doing honest work. You agree to be paid in Reichsmarks. You swing your hammer for a month, burning tens of thousands of calories. At the end of the month, you receive a thick stack of paper money. But that very night, the government prints more money, and the black market price of a sack of potatoes triples. Your entire stack of cash can now only buy a single loaf of sawdust bread. You don't have enough calories to work the next month. You are starving. In a desperate attempt to make a little extra cash for soup, you agree to clear out an old ammunition cellar. Because you are exhausted and unfocused, your hammer strikes an unexploded artillery shell. Your business and your life ends in a deafening blast. This is the tragic result of blindly selling your labor while ignoring inflation and tail risk. Scenario B, the pivot of the strategic scrap supplier. You also have a hammer, but you are hypersensitive to market shifts. Within the first week, you realize paper money is garbage. You execute an immediate business pivot. You stop trying to build houses. You take your hammer, pair it with a makeshift crowbar, and sneak into a bombed-out industrial zone. You don't clear bricks. You target the electrical panels and underground water systems. You patiently chisel away, collecting 10 kilograms of pure copper wire. You take this copper to the black market, refuse paper money, and trade it for 10 cartons of American cigarettes, canned meat, and coffee. You eat a portion of the food to maintain your biological OPEX, and you use the rest as working capital. You use the cigarettes to pay 3 other refugee men, hand them hammers, and teach them how to smash walls for steel. By 1948, when the new Deutsche Mark is issued and the Marshall Plan arrives in full force, You are no longer a wandering guy with a hammer. You own a massive scrap metal yard. When the government's major construction firms need steel to pour bridge foundations, they have to come to you, and they pay in hard currency. In just 5 years, that original rusty hammer was leveraged into a mid-sized construction materials firm. You rise into the new upper class of West Germany. Conclusion. Rising from the ashes, stretching your back and desiring to rebuild the world with your own 2 hands is one of humanity's greatest survival instincts. The image of the Trümmerfrauen, the rubble women, and the hammer-wielding workers standing amidst the ruins of Europe will forever remain an immortal symbol of resilience and honest labor. Their blood and sweat laid the very first bricks for the prosperity of the old continent. However, the macroeconomic lesson behind that historical event remains a brutal warning for anyone struggling through times of crisis. Whether you are holding a hammer in 1945, a gas tractor in 1930, or using a laptop to hunt for startup opportunities during a modern recession. And keep in mind, these are historical analytical perspectives, not modern financial advice. Always consult a professional in your own era. The truth is, a single physical tool can never defeat a ruthless macroeconomic cycle on its own. Blindly diving into hard work, ignoring your operating costs, dismissing inflation risk, and failing to understand where the market's cash flow is truly moving will always lead to exhaustion. The hammer in your hand has the power to shatter the hardest concrete walls. But only a razor-sharp mindset for risk management, an acute awareness of the supply chain, and the ability to protect your own assets will keep you from being crushed under the rubble of the economy. Next time you lose your job and find yourself with only one tool left in your hands, look deep into the macroeconomic picture before you take that first swing. Decide right then and there. Will you be an exhausted biological machine or the architect of a new game? May you always keep your wits about you, no matter what ruins life drops you into.